Today we are making this delicious, light and fluffy white chocolate mousse cake. It is seriously so good. Now the first step is to make our white chocolate mousse because it needs time to chill. We're adding our white chocolate chips and our heavy cream into a bowl, and we're going to heat that in the microwave, then let it sit for a minute and stir until it's nice and smooth. You want to make sure all of your white chocolate is melted, and then we're going to set that aside. Now it's time to whip up our whipped cream. We're adding in our heavy cream, powdered sugar, a bit of vanilla extract, and a tiny pinch of fine salts. We're going to mix this on a medium-high speed in the bowl of our stand mixer with a whisk attachment for about 2.5 to 3 minutes, or until you begin to see texture develop around the edge of the bowl. Once the whipped cream begins to gather inside the whisk like this and it's thick and it can hold its shape, our whipped cream is ready to go. We're folding half of this into our white chocolate mixture that we made earlier, and we're just swooping around the edges of the bowl and pulling through the center until the whipped cream is incorporated. Once the mixture is nice and smooth, we're going to fold in the last half of our whipped cream. Now as you're doing this, you want to be gentle and really make sure that you're following with that folding method so that way you don't deflate your white chocolate mousse too much. You want it to really be nice and light and fluffy, and by folding in your whipped cream, you're guaranteed to have an amazing texture. Once the mixture is nice and smooth, we're going to cover it with some plastic wrap and set it aside. It needs to chill in the fridge for at least 2 hours, or can be chilled for up to 2 days. Next, we're working on our fluffy white cake layers. We're creaming together our unsalted butter and granulated sugar for a couple minutes, or until the mixture becomes lighter in color and looks fluffy. Properly creaming together your sugar and your butter has a huge impact on how your cake layers turn out, so make sure that you don't skimp on the time. Next, we mix in our pasteurized egg whites. You can also use fresh egg whites. I just like using them from a carton so I don't have to separate my eggs. In a separate large bowl, we are going to whisk together our cake flour, our baking powder, and our salt. Once those have been combined, we're adding half of them into our wet ingredients and mix together on a low speed. If needed, feel free to use a rubber spatula to scrape the sides of your bowl just to make sure that everything is getting properly incorporated. Next, we add in our sour cream, our vegetable oil, and our vanilla extract. We're mixing these together on a low speed as well, and once everything has come together, we're going to add in our remaining dry ingredients. I like to mix my ingredients together on a low speed just because that way you're not going to overwork your batter, and you know that your cake layers are going to bake up so fluffy and soft. At this stage, our batter should be fluffy, nice, and smooth, and we're pouring it into our prepared cake pans. I'm using 4 7-inch cake pans that have been greased with nonstick spray and lined with parchment rounds, but you could also use 3 8-inch cake pans. Once all my cake pans are filled, I like to bang them against my counter just to make sure that the batter settles in a nice even layer, and so that any air bubbles that might be trapped rise to the surface and escape before we bake them up. One other helpful tip is to weigh your cake pans on a scale to make sure that they all have the same amount of batter, so that way you know they'll bake up to all be the same height. It also helps them bake more evenly. Then we pop these into a preheated 325-degree oven and bake for about 37 to 40 minutes. Once they come out of the oven and have cooled, we're going to trim off the caramelization on the sides of the cake layers, and we're also going to level the top with a serrated knife. Leveling your cake layers might not seem like that important of a step, but it makes your cake so much easier to fill and frost, especially when you have a thick filling like this, so I highly recommend doing it. We then set our cake layers aside and work on our white chocolate buttercream. Now this buttercream is an American buttercream at its base, so we're going to start by mixing together our butter, vanilla, and salts. We're mixing this on a low speed until combined, and the butter should be really nice and smooth just like this. We're slowly incorporating our powdered sugar, and after adding in about half of it, we're adding in our heavy cream to help make the frosting easier to mix. Then we add in the rest of our powdered sugar along with our melted and cooled white chocolate. I like to melt my chocolate before I start working on my buttercream, just so that way it can sit for about 10 minutes and come closer to room temperature. If you put it into your frosting straight out of the microwave, it's going to be too hot and it can melt your butter and throw off the consistency of your frosting. So just keep that in mind when making this frosting. The final step is just to stir it smooth with a spatula like this to push out any excess air and give us a beautiful, silky smooth frosting, which is going to make this cake so much easier to frost down the road. After piping a ring of our white chocolate buttercream around our first cake layer, we're adding 1/3 of our white chocolate mousse. Now if you're making this cake with 3 cake layers, you can use half, but since I'm making it with 4 cake layers, I'm adding 1/3 of it between each layer. After smoothing that out, we're adding on our second cake layer, and we're going to repeat this process until all of our cake layers are stacked. Soft cake fillings like this white chocolate mousse can sometimes cause your cake layers to slide and make your cake more difficult to frost. If you're running into this, don't worry, just insert either a bubble tea straw or a wooden dowel or even a chopstick into the center of your cake and keep it in place as you crumb coat your cake. Once you pop it into the freezer, you shouldn't have too many more issues with your cake layers sliding, and I swear this trick works wonders and I use it all the time. After smoothing out our crumb coat with our bench scraper and chilling our cake, we're adding on our second layer of frosting. To decorate this cake, I wanted to use an icing comb, so we didn't have to get this layer perfectly smooth, but we did want a pretty even, thick layer, so that way our icing comb could make really nice, smooth grooves. This is totally optional. You can also just use a bench scraper to smooth your cake, but I chose to use this icing comb. I think it's made by Wilton. I'll include the link in the video description below. Now, this always looks a little scary at the start, but you just have to trust the process. It takes several passes around the cake to get really nice deep grooves, and you're also going to need to fill in any areas where you feel like there's not enough frosting just by adding on some additional dabs like this. Icing combs seem like they should be so easy and amazing, and they are really fun, but I swear sometimes it takes me longer to actually smooth out a cake using an icing comb than it does just a regular bench scraper. But that is okay because I absolutely love the way this cake turned out. I think those grooves are so gorgeous, and the last step here was just to clean up that top edge with our small offset spatula. I used my remaining white chocolate buttercream to pipe some small swirls on top of the cake, and then I felt like it needed a little pop of color, so I added a pretty sprinkle blend and some mini white chocolate chips just around the base of the cake, and then she was all ready to go. This is one of the more simple cake designs I've done, but sometimes it's so refreshing to do a really nice simple design just like this. I chilled this cake in the fridge for about 30 minutes just to help the frosting set up and make it easier to get nice clean slices, and then of course I cut in to check out that beautiful cross section. I really love the way this cake turned out. It is so light and fluffy and exactly what you'd hope a white chocolate mousse cake would be like. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you want to make this cake at home, the recipe is included below, or you can Google Chelsweets white chocolate mousse cake.